Typing out the turning point.
The role of a liberalized press.
In the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Valdez.
David Kayekjian.
After the October Revolution of 1917, Lenin and the Bolsheviks seized power in Russia and established a centralized government with the strong censorship of the press that hindered economic, scientific, and technological progress. By the late 1970s, it was increasingly more difficult to maintain the political legitimacy of the Soviet regime that did not meet or represent the people's needs. And in 1985, a chasm began to widen between the leaders and the people. The Soviet leaders were losing the trust of the Soviet citizens.
In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, saw the need for change to save the dying system. He introduced the reform policies of glass
Openness
and perestroika
restructuring
to revive the Soviet economy and to earn back the public's trust in the country's leadership.
In 1986, under Gorbachev's policy of glasnost, a liberalized press began to grow in the Soviet Union. And for the first time, the truth about its political and economic system began to be revealed. The press awakened the Soviet people, helping to type out the fear of the Communist Party and to type out a great turning point in history, the fall of the Soviet Union.
Fear can grab typewriters by the key and plug up ears and mouths. Yet today, under Gorbachev's new policy of glasnost, there is a chance that this fear can fade and our nation can slowly come back to life. As a writer for Aganyuk, we are learning to say out loud the words we were afraid to voice for decades.
За более чем 50 лет вы игнорировали прессу. For more than 50 years, we have ignored the press because it only represented the communist theater of the absurd. Now, we are standing in line all over the Soviet Union to buy Aganyok, Novy Mir, Sovetskaya Rossiya, Literaturная Gazeta, and even Pravda, because for the first time in our history, the press is presenting the truth about every aspect of Soviet life.
The time has come for us in the press to critically investigate our history in order to change the world in which we live. Our country's institutions are essentially Stalinist in origin. Therefore, a genuine turn toward democracy cannot take place until Stalin's heritage is destroyed.
Послушайте, что написано в Агanyok. Listen to what is written in Aganyok. Our great leader Stalin was the real enemy of our nation, an organizer of famine and false trials. He killed 22 million of our people. Millions of our comrades became victims of oppression and were sent to work prisons in Siberia. The press is awakening us from our amnesia and is making us to face the truth. Not only are our great leaders being unmasked, but we also see the failure of later generations to admit that those crimes had taken place.
We must write that the root of the issues we are facing today is in the system of government established during the 1920s. The highly centralized Soviet government controlled every aspect of public life through fear. In addition to a critical re-examination of history fostered by glasnost, there is also a need to critically re-examine the economic consequences of more than 50 years of communist rule.
Сегодня это более читать, чем жить. Today, it is more interesting to read than to live. We are living in the year of the 70th anniversary of the October Revolution. Yet, when we go into a store, there is almost nothing of value to purchase.
In an interview with our magazine, Gorbachev's chief economic advisor called for our leaders to turn from the old ways and save our country. He said the current command administrative approach impedes innovation, as all resources and directions come from the center. The Soviet citizens are not motivated to work because the country is not meeting their needs.
We требуем больше нашего Церевецкого. We demand more of our country. Listen to this passage in Novi Mir. Our rockets can find Halley's comets and fly to Venus with amazing accuracy. Yet, our agriculture and consumer sectors barely rival those of the third world. Today we learn that the United States has created positive incentives to inspire people to work. But the builders of socialism in the Soviet Union have turned our country into a gigantic concentration camp.
We have become the unintended voice of Glasnost. People are turning to us because they want change in their lives. Soviet citizens are writing fearless letters to the magazines, calling the system and its leaders to account. Soviet citizens are putting real actions behind the word Glasnost by demanding democracy.
Сегодня беспорядков изменения растет. Today, in 1988, the unrest for change is growing in the 15 republics of the Soviet Union. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia are setting an example of turning away from Soviet control. They formed a human chain, stretching the entire length of the three republics, protesting against communist rule. The Soviet citizens are one step away from calling for independence.
Today, on November 9, 1990, in East Germany, the wave of popular demand for change has struck down the most important symbol of the Iron Curtain, the Berlin Wall. This makes the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact inevitable. The Soviet republics are demanding the right to secede.
После 76 лет молчания, after 70 years of silence, we're going to use this small opening, sanctioned by Gorbachev, to the fullest. We are fighting for democracy and will stand against everything that impedes our living a better, cleaner, and fuller life. We are learning how to live in the truth, and there is no going back.
In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev rejected the hardline policies of his predecessors, and a turn towards openness and restructuring began. Glasnost let the idea of free speech out, and a liberalized press flourished in the USSR. The contents of magazines and newspapers such as Огонь, Novi Mir, and Sovetskaya Rossiya accelerated the move towards a turning point by providing the facts about the Soviet political and economic system, typing out the fear of the Communist Party. Through the press, Soviet citizens learned to speak out, and it demanded more than restructuring. It demanded democracy and rejected communism, which led to a great turning point in history, the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Only 4 years after Gorbachev allowed the freedom of speech to penetrate the USSR, the Berlin Wall fell. 3 months later, the Warsaw Pact was dissolved, and 15 new countries were formed. 4 months after that, Boris Yeltsin was elected as president of the newly created Russian-Soviet Federalist Socialist Republic on the first free election on June 12, 1991.
This marked the end of communism in Europe,
the end of the Cold War, and transformed the world political situation, leading to a complete reformulation of military, economic, and political alliances around the globe.
However, today, as newly formed independent countries take bold steps toward democracy, Russia, under President Vladimir Putin's rule, has entered a new phase of censorship. To many, President Putin is turning back Russia's attempts to build a democracy. He is now currently serving his third non-consecutive term as president. He has ruled Russia since 1999 and is honoring the hardline policies that Gorbachev rejected. The fear that once grabbed typewriters by the key and plugged up ears and mouths is slowly coming back in many aspects of Russian life.
But the ideas of freedom achieved by Gorbachev were not in vain.
Today, in Russia, there are children of Glasnost who continue to struggle for democracy. That includes not only a free press, but also social and economic justice. Thank you.
The first was looking at your bibliography ahead of time, and I wanted to ask you about the people that you could interview. I thought it was interesting the 3 people who had decided they didn't want their names mentioned. I was just wondering.
Actually, it was very interesting because these are Russian citizens that we interviewed, and the reason they chose to be anonymous because we see that the inner fear that had faded during this time because of Gorbachev's reforms of glasnost becoming reality to them, and the liberalized press making it even more real to them that they're not going to be punished, they're not going to be jailed if they speak their mind, like it was for 70 years before. So, but we see that this inner fear that had captivated them for so long is slowly coming back. You know, one of the interviews that we had was with a man that works in a post, and he was telling us that he was asking, like he asked, where's the democracy? You know, Putin is serving his 3rd non-consecutive term, and he extended the terms from 4 years to 6 years. So he's asking, where is democracy? And he said that his boss came in one day and told him that they have to vote for Putin and participate in the demonstrations, or else there would be consequences. So as we can see, and out of fear, he voted for Putin. So as we can see, this fear is slowly coming back. And another interview that we had with another anonymous Russian citizen, he told us that in 10th grade, he said that his history tests were canceled. So, and he said that this was such a great revelation because up to that point, all that he had been taught about the Russian history were lies, were false, they weren't true. So he said that this is a great turning point. This was another revelation, realization for the Soviet citizens that examined the Soviet current political and economic situation and realized that it was everything that they had been taught about Stalin and the great leaders before had been false.
Yeah, so they chose to be anonymous. We told them, well, what are your names? And it's just for a simple school project. But they said, oh, if the Soviet government finds out, we can be jailed, exiled. So they were still scared to give it. So this shows that Putin there's a new change in Russia.
Are you Russian?
No, sorry. We just had a friend that helped us. I just said the first line of Russian, whatever I said in English, the first line of it was Russian.
So your friend Audrey?
Yeah, he just showed us.
So
You could fool me.
I'll consider it.
So who originally came up with this topic? Did someone recruit someone else, or did you both decide?
No, we both decided. So at first we wanted to do a project on the collapse of the Soviet Union. And then we did some general research and we saw that Gorbachev brought in these reforms such as glasnost and perestroika. And this topic is unique because we wanted to see how did these reforms, how did they reach the people? So through this project we saw that the liberalized press, they were the first to exercise this openness, the reform of glasnost, and provide it to the people by presenting the facts about the past and present Soviet political and economic system. And this is a turning point because this is the first time after 50, 60 years, Soviet citizens, they were taught lies and they were not allowed to say one word. But with the liberalized press, Soviet citizens, for the first time, they were allowed to have independent thinking and not obey to one's will.
Also, we wanted to focus on this part of the collapse of the Soviet Union because it brings about how the citizens reacted. It brings about the Soviet life, like their aspect. You know, a lot of people focus on Gorbachev, and some may even bring Reagan. But we really wanted to see how the Soviet citizens reacted and just their lives during that time.
So was the performance your first venue?
Yeah.